just the last thing regarding the different bone abnormality and joints. Like I said, there's only, I mean, there's a whole chapter on joint, but we're only going to talk about a little bit, and then maybe ask you three questions regarding joints. Okay. And these are the different, the healing process, which basically show you the hematoma that you see, and then the callus formation, spongy, and basically it's the restructuring of bone that you see there. Okay. So this is a good word to know. Osteoporosis usually mean that you have holes in the bone, and my want you to know is menopausal women will often see osteoporosis. Okay, and see here how it looks like the bone osteoporosis. Most likely it's too much osteoclast activity, and that is one of my recent work now. We're trying to publish a paper and shows that if you have estrogen can stimulate osteoclast and actually causes self-death. And this is known as the process is known as apoptosis. And if you don't have any estrogen, the osteoclast will live longer, and they can actually cause this damage that you can see here. Osteoporosis, good word to know. Osteopenia, meaning that lower amount of bone structure. Okay, that's what osteopenia mean. Penia mean lower, decreases bone mineral. Okay. Is a precursor to osteoporosis. That's osteopenia. This is different from osteomalacia. Osteomalacia means bad formation, if you will. And a good example of osteomalacia in children is known as ricket, right, due to lack of vitamin D, if you can say. And this is what they look like. Okay, and you can see here is in the ricket is that as the child's, believe this is the same child taking over time, that if you don't have lack of vitamin D, bow-legged. The abnormal curvature, don't worry about this. This is kyphosis, scoliosis, and this is lordosis. We call that. All right, so a little bit about joint. Joint, of course, is an area in which the two bones meet, right? Just like, you know, there's different ways to classify joints. You can classify based on its function or based on its structure, what they look like or what they do. That's the same topic that we're going to look at in the sense of when we're talking about neurons, you can classify neurons based on its structure, what they look like, or you can base the neuron, give it a name based, you know, what it does and that's what we call that functional. So the same thing, you know, you can say, oh, this joint, what does it look like? So structurally, or you can say functionally. And I think functionally, you guys already know, right? You can classify function if it's moving, as if, you know, this joint is freely movable, or is it immovable, or if it's slightly movable, right? And I think I mentioned to you already, if it's freely movable, we call that diarthrosis. If it's immovable, it's synostosis, and if it's slightly movable, it's amphiotosis. So here is classifications of joints. You can either give them based on what they do, called functional classification, and what they look like, called structural. Okay, structural. So Functionally, we can say that they're either synarthrosis, amphioarthrosis. Amphioarthrosis are freely immovable. Synarthrosis would be together immovable, like the suture in your brain. The two parietal form together. That's called synarthrosis. And the pubis symphysis, for example, is slightly movable, so we call that amphioarthrosis. Or you can classify as bone based on what it's made out of, the joints, what it's made out of. Most book calls us there are three kinds of joints. They're either fibrous joint, they're either made out of cartilage joints or the synovial joints. So the synovial joints would have synovial membrane with the synovial fluid inside of them. And all of your freely movable, as you see here, ball and socket, even the pivotal of the C2 and C1 and C2, for example, or this one right here, and the hinge, all of that condyloid down here, or gliding, are all synovial membrane, freely movable. Okay. Fibrous joints is basically there's fibrous that is formed between the two bones. On fibrous, a lot of these could be synaptosis. Cartilaginous joint, this is typically what you see with the rib, with the cartilage at the end connected to the sternum. Bony joint, and this is only your book uses this term, bony joint is it's a special kind of joint that you often see, so that now that the area of the joints where they meet, you can also you don't notice anymore. It disappears. It's always like one bone. Okay, so it's like the same bone, so they call synostosis. We call that. So that's what bony joint is. All right. So this is what. Just a couple more slides, and I think that's all you need to know. Okay, probably 3 slides. And you can see here is that on table 9.1, synarthrosis, right? Syn mean together, right? So this is how you would classify these joints. Synarthrosis are together, mean that the two bones acting as one. They're immovable. Okay. What are some of them? Well, synarthrosis, like you see here, it looks like the joint, the area is disappeared. You can't see it, and you can read over here. It says is a fusions of the infant's left and right mandible. Okay, so this is one mandible now, but it used to be two, like your maxillary bone. It used to be two. But the fusion together, you can see it, because some people, they don't fuse and they get cleft palate. But the mandibles start out two, but they fuse together into one, and you can't see it. So that's your syn. And that is considered as, what do they look like? They consider as bony. Okay. Cartilaginous that you see here, cartilaginous, and these are immovable again, right? That's the functional. Cartilaginous is like the rib, right? Costals and the cartilage here to the sternum, the manubrium here. The fibrous is oftentimes what you see. Fibrous of the synarthrosis are gamphosis, so don't need to know gamphosis or a suture, but usually it's your tooth fits into the pocket. Okay. Your teeth in the pocket, either your mandible or your maxillary, you can see here. So if I ask you a question, most likely it would be, say, for example, how do you classify the joint in terms of its function? You would say synarthrosis, diarthrosis, or amphioarthrosis, right? But how do you classify joints based on structure? Okay, it could be collagenous, and this is a good example of collagenous that you want to know. Fibrous, and a good example of fibrous is suture. Bony, okay, bony is here. which is a good example of his, which just uses the mandible, if you will, okay, the two bones of the mandible. Um, Now, these are synarthrosis, right? They're immovable. Okay? So here's another example of amphiarthrosis. Amphiarthrosis is slightly movable. Again, there's a fibrous type or collagenous type. And the fibrous is basically, in this called syndesmosis, um, which is basically an example of the ligaments between these two tibia and the fibula, for example. Okay. It makes out of fibrous material, hence a fibrous joint. Let me see. I think there's a fibrous joint up here too, synothosis. That's a good example I would use. Okay, a fibrous material between those as example of synothosis. All right. Amphiarthrosis, slightly movable. This one, the pubis symphysis, is collagenous, uh, which is basically made out of cartilage. And then your diarthrosis are your synovial. So in other words, all synovial joint, all the membranous synovial joint are of this diarthrosis. They're freely movable. Okay. All righty. So that will be then. I think that's all we're going to talk about regarding the joints, and you can actually read more about that. But that's focus on those figures. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. There's no question. I'm going to stop the recording.